When I first bought my film SLR in 1983, it was a Pentax ME Super. And although I kept buying photographic magazines and trying to keep abreast of the latest camera, I had no sort of rush to go and buy a new camera. The main features that seemed to be new on cameras in the mid-80s was automatic focusing. And by the late 80s, automatic focusing and program modes were becoming more and more prevalent, and cameras were changing in design. And in 1989, Minolta brought out something called the 5000i. They decided to have basically two names, the Dynax in Europe and the Maxxum in the States. So you get a Maxxum 5000i and you get a Dynax 5000i. And here we have the 5000i. And I've currently got a Sigma lens on this. I did have a very nice Minolta 1.8 lens, but I recently sold it for a reasonable price. But let's have a look at this camera. Again, in the 1980s, we were getting all automatic in loading our films, which we hadn't done previously, and motor lines were becoming part of the camera. And this is precisely what we see here. We load the film here, we just put it over here. There is a DS coding here, so we don't have to set our film speed. Set the camera, and the film automatically loads. Now, what I find a bit odd on this camera, when I first got one of these, I assumed it was only program because the window said program. And I couldn't see, if you look on the top of the camera, there's no obvious selection. Now, we'll come back to that issue. Another slightly strange thing with the Minolta was that in order to get more program modes, you had to buy little cards. Some cameras came with cards, some didn't. And the cards included things like sport mode, portrait mode. I have got one other card with this, which is a bracketing card. And the cards go in, there's a little doorway here. And if we open up the door, you can see that we then, inside the door, we actually put in our card. We slot it in from the top here. I've got the camera upside down. So you put the card in there, and there, this little window will tell you what card you have in. Now, you will notice as well, or the observant people amongst you will maybe notice that down here we have a timer, self-timer, and we have a mode switch. So if you want to go from program mode to manual, you simply press that. So at the moment I am in manual, and if I want to change the shutter speed, I press these arrows here, and if I want to press and change the aperture, I press this little aperture control here, and that will allow me to change the aperture. The only readings I've got are on the top here. I haven't got aperture or shutter speed in the viewfinder. And this, I think, was the big disadvantage of these cameras. And the big advantage of the cameras that followed these was that you had far more information in your viewfinder. So I'm going to go back to program mode by pressing this button here, as I said, and then you see we've got a big P for program. So when I was using this camera recently, and at that point I will confess I hadn't found the manual mode. I looked for the manual mode. I assumed that you had to get a manual card, but you don't. You just press the little button in here. So on program mode, to be honest, the camera is very much point and shoot. And you can say, well, that's fine, but I can buy a little compact for point and shooting. The nice thing about the camera is it feels nice. It actually feels quite solid, and you feel like you are operating a camera. Plus, you've got a super viewfinder. You've got a typical SLR and it's uncluttered, so it's actually, for compositional purposes, I found it a really good camera to use. I took it out recently and I was quite pleased with the results. Let's just look at them. It was a very misty day, and I will confess that when I took these photographs, not only was it a misty day, but when I got home and developed them, I slightly underdeveloped by about 20 seconds. These are taken on Kentmere photographic film, Kentmere 100, which I find a really nice film, developed in ID 11, and you should give it, with a dilution of 1:1, you should give it 11.5 minutes. I think I gave this about 11 seconds. 11 minutes 10 seconds. However, I think when you are scanning photographs, and this is a scanned, it's not a bad thing if you have a slightly underdeveloped, because you get a slightly more detail. So here we are on the Dorset coast on a very misty morning. We're looking down at a bay and an outcrop of rock which is called Bat's Head. This is walking along the coast path. Some Coast Guard cottages here. Again, the sharpness, this was on the 1.8 Minolta lens, which I really liked. It was a super lens, very sharp, fast, nice detail. Here we have a sign for Bright Noaf. Again, the Coast Guard cottage. The conditions were not good, but it's exactly, I think, when you have not good conditions that you really put a camera through it, and you can sometimes get more interesting results. I finished off the film just in the house, photographing some windows and light reflecting on these windows. It's not a camera I expected to like, however I did quite like using it, and I was pleased with the results, even on the Sigma lens. Now, Sigma old lenses don't, in my experience, aren't as good as late Sigma lenses. I use Sigma lenses a lot with my digital work, and I love them. I remember buying a 3570 zoom for a Pentax camera in the 80s and being really disappointed about it. It was really soft at the edges. However, this one on this Minolta seemed to work moderately well, and I was really pleased with it. So, if you do find a Dynax 5000, or even a maximum 5000i, might be worth giving it a go. Again, many thanks for watching. Bye for now.